Welcome to Board Gamers Anonymous, the podcast of board gamers and the insane fun we have at the table together. This is Chris.
Hey, and this is Anthony.
And this is episode 500. And we like to thank all our Patreon backers for helping us bring you a brand new episode. Anthony, my friend, we did it. 500 episodes.
Woo! We're done. Peace out. I'm out of here.
Wait.
Hold on. We have a whole episode recorded.
It's 500. What?
We're not done, though. We're going to record it.
Oh, yeah.
Or stream it. We're just going to be recording. This is live.
Yes. So that's very different. Not to mention the fact, to be fair, I've done 500 episodes. I think you're missing a few.
You know what? Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's true. But there was another podcast. Well, you did another podcast too. But I'm probably around 500 with both of mine. You're just like 600. It's fine.
It's all good. Yes, this is our 500 episode of Board Gamers Anonymous. For over 11 years at this point, we've been so proud and happy and glad to join you at the table each and every week to talk about the latest and greatest in tabletop gaming. So we're so proud and happy to have you here and share with you our definitive, the greatest list of all time, our 500 spectacular, our top 100 games, number 10 to number 1.
Yeah, I feel like every other time we've done this, it's been not anticlimactic. That's not the right word, because it's a big deal, right? You do your top 100. We only do it every couple years. But this time it's felt like just this huge buildup, because we've been working on this now for 12 weeks since we outlined everything.
Yes.
We had our Hall of Fame episode, and then this is now the 10th episode of the top 100. And so at a certain point, I'm like, this is all we do now. I show up and I talk about 10 games I really like. I'm like, this podcast is pretty easy. I don't got to play. This is awesome. And then I realized earlier today, I'm like, oh, next week I need to go play stuff.
You do?
We need to be ready to review things. This is it's not just the games I love anymore. It could be games I don't like. That's not good. This is fun. Let's just do this forever.
Well, the top 100 list changes, so maybe we now start again.
Right.
I don't know. Or the top 1,000. We'll go through. I mean, Board Game Geek has plenty of all of that up there, so we could do that too.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, if this actually is your first episode listening, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Our episodes are typically, again, talking about the latest and greatest. We talk to our listeners out there, all our friends out there who are listening to the podcast. We typically talk about tabletop game news, everything that's happening in the industry. We talk about video games. We talk about really cool toys like that Lego set Anthony has behind him.
Heck yeah.
And then we talk about our question of the week. We poll our listeners out there on a really interesting, innovative topic each and every week, something different to kind of get the conversation going. We talk about our acquisition disorders, games that we really would love to get to the table. Typically, they're crowdfunded because that's the way things are these days. But
what's not crowdfunded anymore?
Us. We're not crowdfunded.
Oh, that's true. Well,
kind of.
Patreon's in between, right?
Yeah. We're crowdfunded by our patrons. So also that happens a lot too. And that's also another thing we talk about, because our patrons are so fantastic that allows for all these episodes to go up. And on patreon.com/BGA, Anthony, you may know this, or maybe not. I don't know if you're a Patreon backer yet, but are you there at the owner level like I am?
Yeah, dude, I was the first Patreon backer because we needed to seed it with at least one person, and I just never got around to canceling it. So I've been there since day one.
Yeah, so Anthony knows that there's a lot of episode content up there that's exclusively on patreon.com/BGA, and you can check all of that stuff out there. We create new content for that all the time. We listen to all our backers and produce stuff that they're looking to hear about and see about, and we put up there. And then once we get past our acquisition disorders, we talk about our at the tables. We'll talk about typically at least 2 games, if not more, games that we got to the table, things that we got played multiple times. And then we'll give a rating review. And our rating review system is buy. You should run out and buy that game right now. Play. You should absolutely enjoy that game when it hits the table. Dodge. You should avoid that game. I don't care what meetup you're at. Just get out. Or, in fact, the dreaded burn. And that game does not even need to exist on any game table, any game collection, anywhere. And we do burn games, folks. So just to let you know. But we do it responsibly.
There is a whole episode, if you go back a few weeks, where we just literally went through all of our burns, and that was a lot of fun because I was like, man, I don't remember how many games I burned, but there's some bad games out there.
Yeah, there's some misses, there's some broke games out there and such. So that's a fun episode. But we talk about that every week, and then typically at the end we do our feature review, which we really try to make every episode something different, unique. We'll repeat some things if they really need to be updated, because again, we've been on for 11 years, so eventually we need to bring stuff back to talk about the new and updated stuff. But typically we have a brand new feature, and every episode's different, and every episode's a lot of fun. And we've been so great to have so many wonderful people join us, all our friends at the table. So going back all these episodes, just really great people, really great guests, designers, publishers, media people out there, nonprofit people out there, academic people out there, and just gamers like all of you out there. So 500 episodes, pick some random number, and you're going to have a great time.
Ooh, that sounds like a challenge.
I know. Yeah, I think Dave is running that challenge. He's doing a speed run right now.
Yeah, I know. We get an email from Dave like 3 times a week. It's like, I listened to episode 47 this week, and you said this. And I was like, sure, I did. Sure, I remember what I said 10 and a half years ago.
It's true.
Thanks, Dave. We love you.
Yeah. So again, there's a lot of content out there. And again, if you want to find out more details or information, or if you want to know about the podcast as a whole, because we just don't do podcasts, we do events, we do programs, we do speeches and presentations, we run game days, we run charity events, we do a whole number of different things. We were doing BGA Live for quite some time, working with Board Game Arena. And Anthony mentioned earlier, we have other podcasts as well. There's also reviews on our website, boardgamersanonymous.com. And that's really where you're going to find 99% of all the great content up there. Anthony keeps a great website, ratings, reviews, all the stuff that you ever want to know about us, and all the connections to everything else that we do, including one little academic journal, Board Game Academics.
Yes. It's funny, like we're in that stage right now. So Board Game Academics, if you're not familiar with it, which most of you probably are.
I am familiar with it.
I would hope so, as the co-founder. But yeah, we launched a journal earlier this year. We had our first issue went up in March, and we are currently in the midst of peer review on issue number 2. So that'll be publishing once again on March 1st next year. But we're in the midst of it. We got content coming on, and then sometime in the next 2.5 weeks, we'll be putting up the call for papers for volume 3. Whoa. So I know a bunch of people have already emailed me about that and said, when are you accepting proposals and looking at papers? Soon, much sooner than last time. We're going to launch it early and then have that run a little bit longer and give people more time to submit stuff. So stay tuned. We'll let you know on here, but also on Board Game Academics and through the email. And there's a million different ways you can find out. But
yeah, and we have a diverse group of people who submit, and we publish their works. So from people who are well-established, industry leaders, but also a lot of emerging academics and scholars out there in the field. So whether you have multiple PhDs or have never been to a college or university, we want to take a look at your stuff, and we will help you develop it. We'll mentor you through the process and help you produce a wonderful product that everyone can, enjoy and learn more about the tabletop industry from your perspective and from your particular research.
Yeah, for sure.
But Anthony, that's not it. We also have something else to announce that's coming along with Board Game Academics, our victory points.
Yes, a brand new column. So we've been doing a journal now for 2 years, which is crazy to think about. It's a long time. But we have a new thing now. So, and this is a little bit more accessible just in general. Like we want to hear everybody's voice on tabletop games and what it means to them, and like what it means to be a diverse voice in this space. So we've launched Victory Points, which is a monthly or more column that'll be posted on boardgameacademics.com. And it's not part of the formal journal. So this is not something that is going to go through multiple months of peer review and need to be 5,000-6,000 words long and cover all these different things and meet these different academic requirements that we obviously we work with you on, but it's a lot of work, right? And we understand that. It's, if you have a topic, if you have something you're passionate about, if you want to share something about your experience in the hobby or your research or your time or whatever it might be, there's a lot of opportunity to do that now with the Victory Points essays.
Yeah, one of the greatest things about tabletop gaming is the diversity of people at the table and the multitudes and the array of different experiences they have in the tabletop industry and also in the world at large. So we really want to hear your voice. We want to lift and uplift what you're saying so that the community can learn more about you and your perspective and about your community. So this is really a wonderful opportunity. Again, it's not the hard academic research side of this. This is a little more on the softer side, more perspective on your part, and more exploration. And one of the great things is we're looking for emerging writers, and Anthony, our editor-in-chief, is here to help you throughout that process. So you can find all of that information on boardgameacademics.com. That talks about the journal. It talks about the Victory Point essays and all the events and activities and presentations that we and all of our friends in the industry do. So we have a lot of practitioners that work with us. So if you ever want to learn stuff about tabletop gaming and mental health, or tabletop gaming and the best ways to teach it, tabletop gaming and in the classroom, tabletop gaming and different aspects of society, Board Game Academics is absolutely positively the best place to go. It's a wonderful research to help you get more games to the table. So Anthony, with all of that fun stuff to say, we should talk about one more thing, which is what we're doing as podcasters, but also, again, Board Game Academics. We're going to PAX, brother.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we do. That's what we do every year.
We do that.
That's our thing. Like, it's 3 miles from my house. If I don't go, then what am I doing? So,
what are you doing in your life?
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to be at PAX all 3 days, even the night before. So definitely, reach out if you're going to be there. We'd love to meet with you. We'd love to see you. But we're also going to be presenting. So you'll see us, you can choose to see us at least, on Saturday and Sunday. We're going to be presenting about using tabletop games in teaching settings on Saturday at 2:30 in the Crab God Theater. And then on Sunday at 4 o'clock, we're going to be presenting about inclusion and accessibility in games with a huge panel of experts that Chris will be leading. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great time. PAX, if you've never been to PAX Unplugged in Philly, this is the time to go. They've expanded all their rooms. There's more vendors. There's more games. There's more activities. A wonderful time, a great convention, and Philly's a wonderful host for everything that happens there in tabletop gaming. So with that said, Anthony, that's pretty much what we're doing, with the exception of number 500 and the top 100 and the last 10. But really what's really important is our friends out there and all the people listening. We want to get to know about what they love to play and their top 100.
Yes. So yeah, we're going to get to ours in just a moment because I know people are out there waiting. This is live, so you can't fast forward. So I know you're waiting. But next week, we're going to be doing the listeners' top 100 games of all time. Yep. Now, this is something we do every time we do our own top 100, but usually it's a top 10 or a top 20. This time we're doing the full 100.
That's right. It's a big one.
It's a big one, which means we need you to fill out the form. So the only way we can have a top 100 is we have a lot of people submit. Now, the good news is we've already had a lot of people submit. Mm-hmm. So dozens, I think, up closing on a couple hundred people have already submitted to that poll and told us what their top 10 games are, which is awesome. But the more, the better, because we get a better list, get more data, and more people are entered into the contest to win one of the games on the final list. So the way that's going to work is that contest is open until Wednesday. If you're watching us live right now, you can go fill out the form right now. It's on the website, boardgamersanonymous.com. If you're listening to this podcast, today's the last day you can fill out that form. So go do that now and let us know your top 10 games, because I'm going to put that list together Wednesday night into Thursday. Then Friday, we're recording that, and that will be our top 100 listeners games of all time. And 3 people are going to win a game from that final list. So, but you can only do that if you fill out the form, give us your name and your email address, and help us build that list.
Yeah, and you can find more information about this on all of our social medias, but especially Facebook. That seems to be where a lot of the tabletop stuff happens, and our question of the week happens there every week. So it's a really good way to keep in contact with us. And if this is in the far future, you're listening to this episode, hey, thanks. We really appreciate that. Thanks for listening to this old archive episode.
I hope you won a game.
I hope you won all games. That's great.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And just get a time machine so you can come back and, apply for the contest. But you already know who won, so I don't know. Is that fun at that point? I don't know. I guess so.
Yeah.
You have a time machine. What, you know?
Yeah, why are you here? What are you doing?
Do other
Go do
stuff.
something more fun.
Yeah, but listen, you can listen to us while you're in the time machine. That's fine. That's cool.
Oh yeah. No, it's podcast activity, but go do other activity.
It's true. It's very true. So we have a lot of great stuff happening exactly right now. We have a lot of great stuff upcoming. And again, thank you so much for listening, watching, liking, and subscribing. It makes a big difference for the algorithm and for the tabletop industry. So follow us there, follow us on the websites, and follow us on patreon.com/BGA. All right, Anthony. So that's all the good stuff that's happening out there in the world with us and our listeners out there. Let's talk about our top 100 games of all time, the final episode, number 500, the top 10. Anthony, we're doing it. It's happening. We're here. What's the vibes, man? What's the vibes?
I mean, they're all just good games. That's the vibes. I don't know. I will tell you, like, my list this week, it is pretty eclectic. It's all over the place. So I really, like, before we got on here, I was like, what is the theme this week? I'm like, I don't think I have one. I think they're just all really good games that I would play literally anytime. If someone's like, will you play this one? I'm like, yes. Right now? Yes. Sure. Of course I will. Now, thematically, I mean, there's a few games in here that are like 2-player-ish, I guess.
Okay.
A lot of them play solo, but not even all of them. I don't know. There's no clear thread here. It's of all the 10s that we've had, this is the least thready of the 10s. So it's a good list, though. I think it's pretty good.
I think that typically, like, the top 10 lists are, like you said, it's a very eclectic list because these are the games that kind of punch through. Mm-hmm. And I think over the years, having top 10 lists over the last 11 years, where it was like, I don't like this style of the game, but I really like this game. And somehow it just rockets up to the top 10 for some reason. So you may not see duplicates of these types of games previously. It may not feed into a general theme, but these games stand above and beyond, even though they tend to be slightly different, slightly unique in that kind of aspect. And I don't know. I have a new number one, and I think, Anthony, you do too.
Oh, yeah. Super new.
Ooh, this is exciting.
No one will guess. No one's guessed. No one's guessed yet.
I don't even know what's Anthony's top 10, so I'm really excited. Anthony, we are here. It is happening. Your number 10.
All right. My number 10 game is, last time we did this, it was number 3. And the cool thing about us doing on videos, we can just like lift the games up and like, hey, look at that.
I know. There's pictures along with this.
I know. It's audio visual. It's crazy. Marvel Champions.
Yeah.
Here it is, folks. Marvel Champions.
For the listeners at home, it's Marvel Champions.
It is, right? I said the thing while I held it up.
There you go.
Audio and video. I know what I'm doing. So this was my number 3, actually, 2 years ago. It was a game that I was absolutely enamored with. I fell in love with it. And I've been playing LCGs pretty much since I've been playing games, right? And as soon as I realized that there was an LCG I could play by myself, play solo, I was all in on that. So Lord of the Rings LCG, 10 years going now. I've been buying and playing it and building, and I still have all that, and I still love that game. But there's a lot of them, right? There's 3 LCGs you can play solo, and they all kind of have their own vibe. Lord of the Rings is kind of like this hybrid adventure story thing with like a lot of mechanics built in. Arkham is pure story with some interesting decisions going on, and Marvel is like, it's a lot of mechanics. Like, there's not a lot of story going on in Marvel Champions. It's about the puzzle of the game, and I love myself a good puzzle, and Marvel Champions does that, but it does it in such an accessible way where you're not like down this giant rabbit hole. Like I talked about Mage Knight a couple weeks ago. Mage Knight is a rabbit hole. It's a deck builder. It's a card game. It's a rabbit hole, and you're going to play it very slowly, very carefully, thinking through every action. Marvel Champions is not that. It's very tactical. You look at what you have and you take actions and you take them quickly. And then there's a lot of times when that's just what I'm in the mood for. And the other benefit to this game, and I know typically we say, we don't talk about the expansions, but with Marvel Champions, there are so many expansions. Like I organized all my stuff the other day and I had 60 or 70 different heroes, something crazy like that. And so it's so many different ways to play the game now that it's essentially infinite for someone with the amount of time I have. Like I'm never going to play through every permutation. So even if I play through just the story content, which I still haven't gotten through all of, even if I just play through like each hero deck once with like one of the basic villains, which I still haven't done yet, I could be playing this game for years. And it's always a little bit different. It's always a little bit more like, you can make it more challenging, you can make it more simple. It's accessible with my kids, it's accessible with my friends. To some degree, you really have to like Marvel as an IP, because that's a lot of what's built in here, and the thematic nature of the cards and the mechanics that you're using to play them. But it's just an all-around great card game, and so it's the one that I put on the list. I mentioned like paring down other stuff and not overdoing it with like, I have all 3 LCGs on here. So I just have the one, and it's this one, and it's my number 10.
Very nice. Yeah, I think it's a really good point. The expansions are really what makes this game. And a lot of times when you have so many expansions when they're based on like individual characters, the easy way is just to kind of do like, this gets +1, this gets +2, this one gets a -1, or this, that, and they really went to the expense and time and effort to actually make the actions and abilities of the cards reflective of the heroes. And I think that's what makes it such a lively game. It's not just like, oh, here's some more art. It's like they really kind of invested in this, and they perfected this formula over multiple LCGs. So again, for this to be your top LCG is pretty much a big deal.
I know, and especially because if you all remember back far enough, and this is 5 years ago now,
Yeah.
I thought this was a cash grab, and I was like, this is stupid, and I hate it. Because, and I'm perfectly willing to admit it now, part of that reason was that I was heavily invested in both Lord of the Rings and Arkham, and I'm like, I do not need a third game. I need this game to be bad, because I cannot afford to buy all 3 of these.
100%.
Turns out it was great. I have since sold off of my Arkham stuff because I stopped playing it because of this one. So like, I can't afford to buy 2 sets of stuff every month. And so now I have Lord of the Rings and Marvel, which, hey, I'm good with that.
It's a different kind of madness.
Yeah.
It's a lesser of the madness.
It's a more commercial madness. spend.
Disney-based madness. It's a mouse-like madness.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my number 10 is a game in a universe that we have since forgotten, sadly. This is from AEG. This is in the Tempest universe. In fact, for me, this is the Tempest universe. You may know Love Letter, but do you know Dominaire? Ooh, Dominaire. One of the great things about Dominaire, and that I love so much, is Dominaire does something that really is very impressive, which is it gives you an awesome tableau. You're trying to control areas in the city-state of Tempest, and when you actually play the game, the city-state is kind of abstract. You're just trying to control one of these different 10 areas there, and there's a lot of back and forth, and you're trying to navigate and negotiate your way through using the different pieces and players of power. But really what it comes down to is these really interesting card sets. Our little friend here, you might recognize her from Love Letter. She is the Countess, Wilhelma, and putting these cards together in a tableau is a lot of fun. You are selecting who you're going to influence in this city-state, and each of the cards have a number of different activations, some positive, some negative, and depending on how you build up your tableau in like a timeline, they're going to act at different stages throughout the game, and they might activate multiple times throughout the game. So sometimes you want to work with the peasants to kind of gain a foothold of control in a particular region, or maybe you want to go with the royalty. But more and more as you go with the royalty and the religious caste, since they're high-profile people, you're going to get noticed, and that's the last thing you want to happen. You want to be able to control the whole city-state from the shadows. So it's a really interesting back and forth about trying to control the right figures at the right times to control the certain particular areas. And then it comes down to a really nice, straightforward area control game. And that's Tempest. In the Tempest universe, Dominaire.
This game, I don't know what it is, but like I've been listening to you and before that Drew talk about this game for 10 years now. Like, someday I'll play this. And now like we're at episode 500. I'm like, how have we not reached someday yet? How have I not gotten around to playing this game yet?
It's a great game. Like, they had a whole World Series of games, and they were all numbered, and that's the one that really stuck with me. That tableau building was just so much fun, and there's a lot of interaction in the game. When typically Euro games, you weren't getting that back in the day. It's a little bit older. It's way back in 2012, if that's older, so to speak. But it's still a really great game.
Awesome. All right. So my number 9 is moving on here. And we talk a lot about splatter games. I think I had Food Chain earlier on my list.
Yes.
It's the only other one I had on my list. But the one that's always stuck with me as my favorite is The Great Zimbabwe.
Ooh.
So it's a splatter game. You can see, little cheap looking box, nothing on the back.
But really expensive.
It was over $100 for this.
Don't downplay that.
Yeah, it's not even full. Like, all the other ones are packed full. This one's like, it's fine. There's a game in there. And it's the thing about this game that makes it so interesting to me is, one, it feels like a splatter, right? It's tight, it's aggressive, you're constantly getting in each other's way, it's highly interactive, but it feels like a Euro, so it's splatter all the way through, but it's not super long, right? And I think one of the barriers to a lot of their games is that they take forever, right? So if you're going to sit down and play a game like Food Chain Magnate or Antiquity or Horseless Carriage, there's a chance that you mess it up early enough that you're out of that game and you have to play for 2 or 3 more hours. And it's still fun for me, but it's a hard sell when you're teaching somebody new. And with a game like that, you need to be teaching new people how to play.
Yes.
So Great Zimbabwe really jumped out at me when I first played it, because I'm like, oh, you can play this in like an hour and a half. And it's relatively easy to teach. The one thing that's really tricky in the game is like the pathing and like distance to things. But as long as somebody understands it, it's usually fine. But what really captivates me about this game, what makes it so unique and different, is the way that victory conditions work, right? So everybody starts the game with a certain victory point level that they need to hit. I think it's, what is it, like 20? I think it's 20, right? But as you play through the game, you will be drafting these different gods and then these different shaman abilities. And then those are going to increase the victory point requirement. So each card will have like a VR plus something, right? And the more powerful the ability, the more it adds to your victory point requirement. So you could get all the way up to needing to score like 35, 40 points to win the game, but you probably have a really strong combination that you're working with that makes it possible to do that. You can break certain rules. You can make it easier to pass through certain areas. You can take multiple actions in certain ways. You can just ignore certain requirements. Like some of the most powerful god is like a +7, just straight up. But that +7 can be pretty powerful, right? So you can build 2 monuments instead of 1 on your turn, and monuments are how you score points. So now you're scoring points much faster than everybody else. On top of that, you're also getting these crafting cards, which let you build these different types of goods. And the goods that you can build are going to depend on what other goods you can reach. So each good type needs to access some type of resource. And then some combination goods require multiple goods coming together. And that's where you get into like the pathing requirements. And like, are you close enough? Can you reach it? Have you upgraded your stuff enough to be able to reach it? Do you have enough cows, because cows are the currency, to be able to purchase these things? And those also increase your VR. So really, like, the flow of the game is, you got this crazy map, which is ugly because it's splatter, but you got this crazy map that you're trying to manipulate and work through and like hope that other people don't block you out. There's an auction constantly happening to like be able to take these actions and do these things. And like the turn order matters a lot. And then you're trying to like build up your victory points that you're gaining, because if you don't get them on a certain turn, if somebody blocks you, then all of a sudden you're a full round behind on that race, because the game is a race. And it's just such a tight, interesting, fun flow to the game that's different every time. There's no like perfect way to play it because it's constantly responding to what other people are doing. It's my favorite splatter game, and it's obviously one of my favorite games. Number 9, Great Zimbabwe.
Excellent. And it's a splatter game you can get to the table. So that
is a huge thing. Yeah. It's a funny thing because like I feel like I could teach the basic rules to this game in about 10 minutes.
Sure.
And then through the course of the game repeatedly teach people about like, oh no, okay, but here's how the pathing. No, okay, now you count this way. Water doesn't count unless you have this ability. You got to go around the water, but then you can go through the water if you do that. No, not that. Like,
yes,
there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts. Like the game gets a little weird with the rules, but the basic rules are fairly simple. It's like 5 pages.
excellent.
So Great Zimbabwe. Never know.
Very nice. My number 9 is I think a game that's being reprinted next year. One of my favorites, surprisingly enough, right? Number 9 here. The Manhattan Project, Energy Empire.
Ooh.
So this is the game that kind of revolutionized a lot of what we thought about the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was about building the big bombs to drop, and it was very militarily based, and you had spies. A good game, a little bit on the boom, boom, boom kind of situation. Right. But what they did is they took the general theme, they took the general kind of universe of the Manhattan Project, and they were like, well, instead of like nuclear power and all that kind of military might and scientific prowess like to use for war, what if in fact it was actually used to build up an energy empire? And in this game in particular, to build up a really cool tableau of science technicians and technology and engineers and politicians to be able to utilize technology in the best way possible in order to generate energy for your country. Now, how they do this is probably the most fun part, because as you go throughout the game, you start to have to make decisions on how your empire or how your country is going to develop energy. Now, what's cool about the game, at least the first part, it's a worker placement game. So you do have your workers that go out, purchase technologies, recruit different people for your country, but you also are able to generate energy. The energy is generated through dice, but you get to decide what types of energy you're generating. So maybe you're going coal, maybe you're going really hot with nuclear, or maybe you're going environmental, like with wind energy. Now, each of those dice have different symbols on them because they're going to produce different amounts of energy based upon the power of that kind of system. But each of those dice can also produce environmental damage through pollution. So you're going to have your own particular tableau that you're going to be polluting throughout the game. Even if you're able to go completely clean, there's still going to be challenges with the industries that you're building throughout. So your job is to generate energy as cleanly as possible. At the same time, use a lot of your engineers and scientists and politicians out there to be able to clean up the environment, because as that locks down due to the pollution, so does your chance for scoring victory points and generating more and more energy. So there's a process where maybe you're doing kind of old, kind of dirty energy production, and then you're moving towards clean, or maybe you're going straight for nuclear power with all the challenges that go along with that. The game is really dynamic. Building a beautiful tableau, rolling the dice, because honestly, sometimes you do that when you generate energy. You never know what exactly you're going to get. And just the different card selections are so smart. It's just a really phenomenal, great game to get to the table. I'm so happy that they're going to be reprinting next year so more people can see it. I think it's getting an, just artistic kind of renewal, but the original production back in 2016 is still very good. So if you get the 2016, you will not be disappointed. You get the new versions, probably also very good. I got my version from Minion Games, and I still love and enjoy it to this day. Energy Empire.
It's a good game. This was my number 77, and I think the only reason it's not higher is because I just haven't played it much in the last few years. It's such a clever spin on the worker placement mechanic, because it's not just worker placement, right? That's what I want. I love worker placement, but I need it to be more than that. And that's what this ends up being. Cold War expansion, also very interesting. Add some weird, mean stuff to the game, and it sounds like that's going to be in the reprint. So thankfully, everybody will get access to that, because nobody has access to it now. So,
sure. Again, it's really, really a smart game if you want to help people understand general environmental practices in industry and how countries deal with it and manage it in a really smart, realistic way, but also really a lot of fun. It's dice rolling. It's rolling a bunch of really cool dice and hoping that the energy produces. as clean as possible, but also clean up your environment so that you can produce more energy throughout. So
Yep.
a lot of fun, that game.
Yeah, I've used this game in Fishbowl in my class. It's too long to play in like a 80-minute class, but I've like walked through it with students just to show them like, here's how you can gamify energy production. And they're like, and they're like, oh, actually it looks fun.
And it was one of the first games that really did that, and really a smart design for it as well. I think they kind of pasted over the Manhattan Project over it, but the theme works really well with it.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So great game. Next up for me is number 8. This game is my favorite version of a game that also has 3 different. So I guess that is maybe the common theme. My favorite version of a game that has multiple versions. This is Gaia Project. Ta-da!
Ooh, fancy.
Yes. So this is the Spaceborne, more modular version of Terra Mystica, which has since also, there's a third version now, Age of Innovation, which I also love, and I almost put on my top 100 list, but then I was like, I have too many games. I need to pick one of these. Terra Mystica has, in the last year, left my house. I sold it.
Wow.
I don't need 3 of these, so I kept Gaia Project because it is my favorite, and I kept Age of Innovation because it is like the better, more interesting version of Terra Mystica to me. Terra Mystica is still great. I would still play that, but it's just, I've moved on, right? That's 1.0. The 2.0 and 3.0 are great. So Gaia Project it's a lot of the things that you know and love from Terra Mystica, right? So you have individual races that are asymmetrical to a certain degree, that each have buildings that they're putting out into this galaxy. As you put them out, you unlock different income levels, and you put out high enough things, you unlock special abilities, you unlock all these different things on this technology track that you move up in these different columns to unlock your abilities in terms of things like where can you terraform, and how much income are you going to get, and when can you send out Gaia projects to take care of these special planets that only can be, changed to livable with a Gaia project. So it takes the core ideas from Terra Mystica and it turns it into a much more modular game, because the map is modular, the planet layout is more modular. Things aren't next to each other anymore, right? There's like they're all spread out because it's in space. It also makes the priest track way more interesting by turning into a technology track. And those priest tiles and those tokens that you used to get when you upgraded your buildings high enough are now these additional upgrades that go into kind of your own tableau and help you kind of build out what you're doing. So the result is every action you take feels intentional and it does something. Whereas in Terra Mystica, I'd say about 20% of the actions you take are like, and I'm moving up this track, and that's my turn. You're like, cool. Now I'm moving up this track, and that's my turn. Like, okay, this is boring. Whereas in Gaia Project, you're working towards something, and you feel like you're specializing. Like, okay, I'm really good at terraforming, and I have a ton of science. And science lets me move more up the tracks, so I'm going to do more terraforming, and I'm going to get to the top. And now I have a key because I built this little empire, and now I'm going to use that key to flip over this tile, and that tile is going to let me do this. And everything kind of chains together in a more interesting way. I have loved this formula since day one. This was like the first heavy Euro I played was Terra Mystica, and the first time we played Gaia Project, which was actually with you at PAX, I was like, oh, this is better. This is just a better version of that. And I like space theming. And as I've gotten older, I've liked it even more, just, compared to like fantasy theming, because I think you can do more interesting things with it.
Sure.
But it's just a more interesting game all around. And, Age of Innovation is fantastic. It is a very interesting, fun, modernized version of Terra Mystica, but I still prefer the modular approach from Gaia Project, which also now has an expansion. I have not played it yet. It has a whole new module with the Lost Fleet and then new stuff, and you can play with additional things. So I'll probably be reviewing that on the podcast in the next couple months once we get back to regular reviews. But even just the base game, which I've played 100 times at least since it came out, was one of my favorites of all time. It's Gaia Project.
They took a big shot there because Terra Mystica was just well loved. It was becoming designer board game version of chess. Like there were just endless forums out there about how to build, what's your opening moves, what race to pick, which paths to build and terraform and follow. It was so dynamic. It was really interesting to see, and like that was going to be the game. And then they just were like, you know what, we could do this better. I don't know why they did that, because like it just owned that space, and Gaia Project came out. And again, the artwork isn't as dynamic as Terra Mystica, but the mechanics are, and the tracks are, and there's just so many other elements to it. And I'm really happy they brought the expansion out, because now it'll bring more attention back to the original game.
Right. Yeah. Like there are 3 expansions for Terra Mystica. They're all very good. They introduce different things. Like I've been years now. I've been saying like, give me Fire and Ice. Give me some of this, like the sailing, the ship stuff.
Yes.
Let's see some of that in Gaia Project, but like tweak to the Gaia Project formula. And so now we have a little bit of that. So maybe we'll see more of it in the future.
Yes.
It's just a great system. It works really well.
Excellent. All right. Well, my number 7. Well, my number 8 game is this. Wait a minute. It's that. Wait, depending on where the screen is. Anthony has
it's
it.
Here. I have it. It's right here.
Anthony has it. He has the game. Depending on where you look, it's somewhere on the screen.
Yes.
First Class. All aboard the Orient Express. This is one of the games that I've loved since the first day that I played it, and I've enjoyed every gameplay of it ever since. It does so many different things right at the table. First up, and most importantly, it's very thematic on the table. You are, in fact, building 2 trains throughout the game. And as you're selecting different cards from the market, you are trying to accommodate all of these different passengers, on this very luxurious trip. So you are building up these different train cards and scoring additional points for the length of your train. And then you're also filling up these different train cards with different passengers for those trains. And sometimes they're business tycoons, they're diplomats, they're actors, they're royalty. And it just paints such a lavish picture on the table. And it's so nice to see. Now that you have these 2 trains built, that's not it. You actually get to run the trains throughout their little pathways. Very similar to Shipyard, where you build up these giant ships and then you sail them along the same little similar kind of path. So almost those 2 games are identical, at least in that aspect of it. First Class is much more streamlined, smaller, compact game to get to the table. And basically, you have a choice from 5 different decks. You're going to pick 2 of those, and that's going to make up your train. That's going to make up your victory point bonuses based upon who's on your train or how you kind of run your train. And you can mix those up. You can play different decks. And there's even a murder mystery one that you can play with the game as well. So it's the early days of the 20th century, and trains are the thing that everyone wants to be on, because it's such a romantic, mysterious adventure that everyone's able to take together. And it's just really a great fun time to get to the table. And I think everyone I've ever played with has enjoyed this game. But for me, it's been a love of mine throughout. And that is First Class, all aboard the Orient Express.
Right here.
There, the thing. Right there. He showed the thing.
You know the funny thing? I didn't realize this. This is my number 78. I talked about it a few weeks ago. Manhattan Project is my number 77.
Whoa.
So I don't know if you got into my list and you're just like, I'll take that chunk and I'll take that chunk. So your next one's going to be Black Angel, right? Because that's my number 79.
I have not talked about it yet. I have not talked about it, so it's possible.
Yeah, it may be. No, but First Class is awesome. I had the same experience the first time I played it. It wasn't my copy; it was someone else's, and I was like, "This is brilliant. This is amazing." I didn't even know it was designed by the Russian Railroads guy.
Yeah,
I was just like, "This is fantastic, and it's fun, and it's short, and it's direct, and there's multiple modules, and it's great." Like a lot of stuff that modern games have now. Like, oh, there's like 12 ways to play it, but back then you got a game, and it just was a game.
It was just straight, and that was all it was.
Yeah, and it was just fantastic, to the point where immediately I got home and I was like, must order game, must find game. I need to own this. This is great. I've had it ever since. I don't play it as much as I'd like to. And it's not even because it's easy to teach. There's nothing wrong with it. I just, I don't know. It just doesn't make it up. So I got to play it more.
You do. It's my number. Good. Yeah, my number 8.
All right. Next up for me, my number 7 is a game that I believe you already talked about. So I know it won't be next on your list. Watergate.
There you go.
So talk about 2-player games. See, how can I tie this into the theme that I'm talking about? There's a lot of 2-player games, especially political ones. And most of them are really long. So The problem that I end up having with a lot of those is not that they're not good. Like 1960 Making the President, fantastic game, right? I don't know if it made it to my list this year. I don't think it did. I think it fell off, but it's just an amazing experience. It's 2-player asymmetrical, card-driven gameplay. Just one of my favorite types of games. Twilight Struggle, another game like that. Just amazing, super deep 2-player back and forth tug of war type of game. But these games are long and they're really hard to teach, right? Because it's hard to explain to somebody everything that could come out of that deck.
Sure.
Watergate has relatively tiny decks, and all the components fit in this tiny little box. And the game takes 45 minutes. So you can play it every single time. I've taught this to somebody, we played it 2 times.
Yes.
Because each time you're like, okay, I'll play Nixon this time, you play Nixon the next time.
Yes.
And that's the way you teach it, really. You just play it twice.
Yeah.
I can't do that with 1960. We can't both play Nixon. It takes too long. Right? So it shortens it streamlines it makes it accessible in a way that I really enjoy. I like these political asymmetrical 2-player games.
Sure.
It is interesting from a historical perspective. Like, you do learn a lot just reading the cards, which I know you talked about.
Yeah.
And just the tug of war nature, it is such a tight back and forth game. I've never really played a game of Watergate that didn't come down to like the last handful of rounds. I've never played a game where one side just shellacked the other, because it's just not designed that way. It's built in such a way that someone, it's gonna go back and forth. There's gonna be that balance. And when it first was announced, I was like, oh, 2-player political game. That sounds interesting. And I picked it up at Gen Con, because I pick up everything at Gen Con. But later down the road, having played it, I'm like, I can't believe this works as well as it does. Like, how did they do that? Because they've released other games. Like, there's a chess game that's kind of similar in scope and size from the same designer and the same publisher, and it's fine. It's not great. It's fine. There's a lot of other 2-player small box games, and they're fine.
Yeah.
But this one is brilliant. Watergate it's my favorite small box. Like, and you still need somebody who's willing to play a political game. Not everybody's willing to do that. But if you find somebody, if you have a friend who's willing to do that, Watergate's the way to go. So that's my number 7, Watergate.
There's just, again, the game is so thematic, and that's what I love about gaming, where like just by taking the mechanical actions, you're engaging in a process that just educates you throughout, and it comes back around. It just makes more and more sense immediately as you're playing it, and you just kind of get enveloped in it. And each of the cards that you're able to play, they're all fantastic. There's not junky moves. While you're playing them, you do feel powerful. You do feel like you're on the edge of victory, only to be thwarted again and again. But then you get your cards and you're like, boom, 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 this is going to be great. And then thwarted again and again. You're just like,
It's just got that thing like War of the Ring does this, like this big epic long game where like every action you take feels powerful.
Yes.
And yet it's not enough because the other side also has powerful actions. Like, how do you design something like that where the balance is so perfect? And that's what Kiesling did. It's great.
Yeah, and just that energy, obviously very true of that time period in that particular situation where everything was on a knife's edge.
Yeah.
And that comes out in a little tiny box of a game. That was my number 17. So well deserved.
Yep. 100%. Let's play it next time we see each other.
Absolutely. All right. My number 7 is a little bit bigger of a game. In fact, it's a big game. Woo! Talking about games that you and I played together at PAX Unplugged, Anthony, Underwater Cities.
Yeah.
By Vladimir Suchy. Obviously one of my favorite games of all time. I think one of your favorite games of all time. It is tableau building and I guess certainly underwater construction at its best. This is the game that really replaced Terraforming Mars for me. And it does it by doing something very simple, by having different errors of the cards that come out there. So it's not just like a stack of cards and good luck on building. This actually does kind of build throughout the game. And by building this underwater civilization throughout, you really feel like you're taking part in this exploration and this construction. And everyone can choose different ways in which they're going to score points. There's a lot of victory point cards in the game that you can, race towards. And yet it's very tight as a worker placement game throughout. So sometimes that's intentional, sometimes it's not. So you really have to play your cards very tight to the chest throughout. But it gives you a lot of ways to score. And the cards are just nice and crunchy. They all do really cool things. And you really build up a great tableau. And then each and every phase where you're able to reap all those resources that you need to build up your underwater city, you really feel it. The expansion makes this game much, much better, if for no other reason but the baseboards that allow you to actually put the pieces on so they do not move. But delicious games. That's the name of the company, and that's actually my review. It's a delicious game. Everyone should be playing this.
Don't eat it.
Don't eat it. This is not
they
good.
Look like candy. Don't eat them.
No, kids, no.
Yeah, Underwater Cities is fantastic. It was my number 38. And it doesn't quite kill Terraforming Mars for me, but it's up there. It's close. It gives me a different feel, but it's a really good feel, right? I wish more games did this genre, like with the tableau building, worker placement type stuff, in the same way with like the staggered decks, because I think it's the best way to do it. And we just haven't seen it as much. We get the giant stupid decks that are 1,000 cards. So my number 6, moving on to the next one here, we have one of my probably, I guess, based on just data, it's up there as my favorite dice placement game, The Voyages of Marco Polo. So this is Simona Luciani and Daniela Ticini, who show up on my list several different times. And it is a game about traveling through Asia as Marco Polo and his various entourage, and completing different contracts and visiting different locations and all that good stuff. But what really makes the game interesting, and I know, Chris, you talked about this before in a previous episode, is that your workers are dice, and the dice you roll at the beginning of every round. So you don't necessarily always have good workers, quote unquote. They might be low values, which limits what you can do. So the game, while it has a lot of strategy to it, you can make a plan. You have locations you want to get to. You have an asymmetrical power that you start every game with, which is extremely powerful. So you have a direction you want to go, but you also have to respond to the way you roll your dice. And the game will give you benefits if you roll low enough, and that even pushes you in a different direction. Like, okay, I have a ton of camels now. I guess I'm traveling. So I need to get to the travel action before someone else, because I don't have that. My dice value is kind of low. It's just such a tight game. Like, you have 5 rounds, you have the 5 dice each round, you have a limited number of things you can do with those. People get in your way because it's worker placement, and if you want to go to those same locations, it gets really expensive. And it's the way it's constructed, and I've mentioned this before when we talk about Lorenzo and some other Euros. It's tight, and it forces you to make difficult decisions, and at the same time everything is super open, and you have a lot of options for how you can kind of do things. So it's I really, there aren't many better ways for me for a Euro to be constructed, right? It should be limited options, very tight decisions, but every decision you make feels empowered. Like, you're always doing something interesting and fun, and you are unique compared to the other players. And that's what the Voyages of Marco Polo is. Expansion is very good, but it's not necessary, to me at least. I think it adds a lot of really cool stuff, and I have it, but the base game by itself, I've played, dozens and dozens of times, and I'm perfectly happy with it as is. I think the most recent time I played it actually was with you, Chris, when we were in New Jersey, and I was like, yep, still great. Love this game. Play it anytime. So yeah, Voyages of Marco Polo, fantastic. Oh, it looks like we lost audio for Chris. So let's see here. Yep, his audio is gone, so I just get to vamp a little bit. The joys of live recording. Let's see, more about Voyages of Marco Polo. So I guess the main thing I will remember about this game is every single time I've taught it to someone new, every single time, which is maybe a dozen times, someone will look up and be like, "Is this right? Does this actually happen? This is what's going to happen here?" Because the player powers are ridiculously overpowered, and they're designed that way. And who knows if the game's balanced? I'm sure it's not. but it just feels like you're breaking the game, and that's a really fun feeling to have in any game. You should always feel like that. I think if I was ever going to design a game, it would be a game in which you feel like you've broken the game, because that's the most fun way to play. It's just this whole concept and idea that you're like, whatever I do, you can't counter it. And of course they can, because everybody else also has their own broken power. So yeah, Marco Polo is unique in that way. I mean, it's not unique in that way. A lot of games have that, but it was like super over. It's a lot. It does it a lot. So, all right. So we still have no audio. Oh man, the joys of technology, folks. It's always fun. So I guess what we'll do is we'll take a step back, and maybe we'll have Chris, if you want to refresh, let's see if this thing will keep broadcasting. I guess we'll find out. Yeah, it looks like it. We're all still here. So thank you to everybody who's watching, by the way. So I know we haven't really addressed the audience so much, but I know you're out there. I could see you watching, and thank you for the comments we've received. It's so amazing to reach 5. It's weird to reach 500 because we've been kind of on the precipice of this for so long. But it's also amazing, and to have you all here watching with us and participating is just fantastic. So really appreciate it.
Are we back?
Chris has audio.
Yay!
And we didn't crash. So.
This is why we're an audio podcast, people. Audio podcast.
Yeah, we cut, we combine. Nobody knows it happened.
It's true.
We're live, and Anthony gets to talk about Marco Polo's randomness for an extra 5 minutes. All right. Well, I've definitely said my share on that one. So.
What I will say about Marco Polo, it's obviously on my list as well. It's a little bit lower on my list than yours, but it is the worker placement game that's meant and made to be broke, and yet you cannot break it with all the special powers there. And that's one of the great things about the game is just having the opportunity to take advantage of this, mostly historical figure that can do stuff on the map, but yet at the same time enjoy the ride, but not worry too much because everyone else is enjoying their ride at the same time too, and it's infinitely playable with a lot of people at the table. So lots and lots of fun throughout. But you already knew that. It's on your list, man.
I know. It's right here. It's number 6. It's amazing.
All right. Well, my number 6 is my favorite Feld. And that's a big thing to say because I love a lot of Felds. Felds is a man who knows how to design a great game, has a diversity of great games out there, and mostly they're very different from each other, especially way back when in 2013. Stefan Feld, with artwork from Michael Menzel, came out with Bruges. Bruges is my favorite Feld and one of my favorite games of all time. And I'm talking about the original here, not the City Edition, where it kind of strips away a lot of the beautiful artwork and just the gorgeous, gorgeous nature of Bruges at the time of the 15th century. So basically what you're doing in this game is you're a merchant and you are trying to build up a reputation with the city, and you're trying to trade resources, of course, because it's a Euro game. And in a Euro game, you always trade resources. But this game is also about tableau building. So the tableau building here is key because you are trying to put all of these people in houses in Bruges. So you're helping to build up the city, put people in position and power with under your influence out there. And there's so many different artisans and royalty and people of commerce throughout, and craftspeople and artisans. And each of them provides unique special powers that can benefit you in the game. Now, where does it benefit you? It typically benefits you in the multi-use cards. Again, another wonderful mechanic that's not used enough because I'm sure it takes endless numbers of gameplay and algorithms to actually crunch that stuff down so that multi-use cards work. The multi-use cards are great here because by being able to place these different people in the houses, again, the houses are the other side of the card, you'll be able to have their special ability throughout the game. If you don't want their special ability, You'll be able to get apprenticeships and workers out there on the board. You'll be able to build the canal out. You'll be able to get gold out there. You'll be able to deal with all the troubles that Bruges is dealing with. And it's just a lot of fun. The expansion does make the game a lot better because when you roll the dice, each side of the die is going to allow a different action to take place. But with the expansion, the 3 and 4 side actually does something as well. This edition's out of print as well as the expansion. The expansion went out of print quite fast. So it was nice to have the city edition, but the artwork, the theme, and the fun of the cards really in this edition is great. So it's Bruges back from 2013. Whoosh.
Bruges is a game. I recognize that that's a game. It's tough. We try to stay positive here. Bruges was never like, it just didn't click for me. And I think that like the whole thing with the base game of like the 3 and the 4 not doing anything was part of it. And then the fire elements. I love multi-use stuff. I wanted to like the game. I've played it several times because I did want to like the game. I owned it for a long time because I'm like, I should like this, right?
Yeah.
And it just never quite clicked for me. But I totally understand why you do.
Multi-use cards, tableau building. I mean, it's Feld. It's Feld.
It is Feld.
It's
that
the
is a true
Feldiest
fact.
Felds.
That's funny. All right. Next up for me is the lightest game of my top 10. Probably not a huge surprise to anybody because I've talked about this one almost nonstop for the last 3 years or however long it's been out. But Cascadia. Ooh. Pacific Northwest.
It's tiny.
Yeah. Tiny little box. Yeah. Not as small as Watergate, but I would say lighter than Watergate for sure. This is a tile laying game. Fairly simple mechanically. It's abstract, in which every turn you're going to take a combination of an animal token and a tile, and you're going to place it in your tableau. You're going to put 20 things in your tableau, and then you're going to check the scoring requirements and see how you did. So there are 5 different types of animals. Each animal will have a different scoring card every game. There's a bunch to choose from. So you always have different permutations, and it's usually like some combination of where the animal is, who it's next to, how many are in a row, that kind of stuff. And that combination of, and like a lot of games sound like that, but for whatever reason, this one in particular really clicks with me in a way that those others have not. It's straightforward. It's streamlined.
Sure.
Teach the game in 5 minutes. I played it with both my kids easily. It's based on the animals of the Pacific Northwest where I'm from. So it's a little bit of nostalgia there, of course. Beautiful artwork in general. And it's like that perfect in between, right? So like Flat Out Games makes a lot of these smaller abstract-y games. There's Calico, there's Verdant, there's Nocturne. There's a bunch they've released recently. This is by far the best one because it manages to feel like you're doing some complicated. It's got like that Sprawlopolis feel to it, where like the mechanism of what I'm doing is very straightforward. Take a thing, place a thing, but doing it in the most efficient way possible is very difficult, and it's a fun challenge to kind of face. This game it's been up here for a while for me. It's one of my favorites. It jumped up 2 years ago. There's an app that just released into early access on Steam that is very good. I've been playing it a lot the last week or so, which I highly recommend if you like Cascadia or if you just want to check it out. So Cascadia it's my favorite abstract game. It's my favorite tiling game. It's my favorite of the Flat Out games. It's one of my favorite games, number 5.
So what I'm getting from that is one of your favorite games of all time.
Yeah. It's hard because we get into the top 10 and you're like, some of these games are really complicated. I'm going to talk for 10 minutes. Some of them are Cascadia, where it's just like, I don't know, you take an animal and you tile and you put them in your tableau and you score it. That's all the game is.
No political
There's nothing to it.
No political intrigue whatsoever.
No. I mean, the elk and the fox might get into it, but you never know.
It's possible. We don't know that. That's the expansion.
Yeah.
Cascadia Watergate Edition.
There is an expansion, I guess I should say. It's not very good. It's fine. It doesn't really add anything you need. But yeah, I don't know. It's if you like abstract-y games, if you like tiling games, if you like puzzle-y games, it is all those things, and it's among the best of those things.
Very nice. Like it. All right. Well, I guess talking about creatures out there, animals out there in nature, my number 5 game is Dominant Species Marine, back in 2021 from the late and great Chad Jensen. I mean, just look at this box. Does this box not say
such a cool box?
This is like next level kind of like artwork here. And this is the artist is obviously Chad Jensen, and forgive me, Chechu Nikito. And it's just, I remember seeing the original Dominant Species came out, and it had all the dinosaurs and different creatures on there, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be the most thematic board game of all time. Creatures and attack and stuff like that. And I'm like, when I was a kid and you want to play with this stuff, and you're like, oh, thematic kind of monster game. And then you turn it around and it's the most Euro game a game has ever Europed. Look, it's hexes, and it's got little discs, and it's got cards with a lot of text that you have to follow, and you don't see on the box, but there's cubes, and there's cylinders, and there's cones, because, you know, Cones of Dunshire kind of got a lot of their theming from at least the original Dominant Species. This is the new wave, no pun intended, for Dominant Species. And really what sets it apart is there's a couple things. First, your individual faction that you're putting into play here allows you to have kind of a little more choice as far as what your special abilities are going to be in the game. So right off the bat, you're going to be able to have more control on what you're able to do throughout the game based upon that initial starting strategy that you put together, that's going to give you a different special abilities than the other players at the table. Second, the game is faster. So whereas the other game is you're placing out your cylinders to take actions on the board, and then those resolve in a particular order, this you're able to do more of a worker placement type of situation and be able to activate the spaces on the board immediately. Not to mention the great artwork, and this really feels so different. This really kind of, it feels more like an alien civilization that we're kind of like touching on, whereas we knew the primates, we knew the insects and things like this. So 2 to 4 players, 1 to 3 hours, GMT, genius game. It's going to take time, but it's going to bring you nothing but love, and it's really a great game. And that's Dominant Species Marine.
Dominant Species Marine, great. It was our game of the year. The year it came out, for good reason. It's my number 85. So maybe the theme of your list this week should be games that Anthony picked earlier on his list.
Well, to be fair, my list did come out first. I still haven't
That's
seen.
That's true. That is a good point. I could have looked at yours and added them later on mine. I do love this game, though. It is fantastic. I always liked Dominant Species. Yeah. Like the first time we played it, I was enamored with it, and we didn't finish the game because it was so long that we got kicked out of the room.
I know.
And that always stuck with me. I'm like, I don't know if I want to play this. When somebody was like, let's play Dominant Species, I'm like, maybe not, because I don't know if we have time for that.
Sure.
And then this one comes along, and I'm like, oh, it's shorter. It's more direct. It modernizes the worker placement component. It's still really mean, but not like as aggressively in your face mean.
Yes.
And the game itself isn't mean to you. It's the other players, which is important, because the original Dominant Species, the game itself could be mean, where like the certain card comes out and somebody grabs that card and everybody hurts because of it.
Yes.
So I love this game. I think it's fantastic. It's a shame that Chad Jensen didn't get to see it published, because I think it is one of the best games ever made, and a huge step forward for the game.
And again, you look at the box cover, you look at the super abstracted Euro kind of presentation, and you're like, what am I looking at? I'm not sure if I'm really feeling this. But the gameplay really is the thing that is different and unique. We talk about a lot of heavy games out there, but generally Anthony and I are very big fans of like thematic games that have a lot of fun and feel to them. And when you're playing with cones and cubes, it does not seem like that's going to come through. It does come through here.
It does. It really does. Yeah, you really feel like you're playing as like a crustacean or a shark or whatever it might be.
It's crazy.
All right. Next up for me, numero cuatro, number 4. This game last time was my number 2. It dropped down a little bit because of a couple other games that jumped up on the list. But it is still among my favorite games of all time. And there's actually a Kickstarter right now for new content.
What?
It's upside down. It's Root. Love me some Roots. This is so it is effectively a coin game. If you're not familiar with coin, it's counterinsurgency system of games from GMT in which you have multiple factions. They're asymmetrical and they represent different parts of a non-traditional war, right? So there's games based on like the Cuban Revolution and like Gandhi's quest for peace through nonviolent protest. And this game is similar in that regard because there are multiple factions. The base game comes with the 4, and they each have very different mechanics that help them find victory, right? So you have like the cats who are basically just trying to spread out and cut down the forest and take over. Like you have a bunch of cats and they just go out there.
Damn cats!
They're everywhere. Where's my cat? I got the minis in here somewhere. I can only find my mouse, but here's my mouse. So
Aww.
You have the Woodland Alliance, which is the kind of the Robin Hood characters, the insurgency, I guess. They're the ones kind of overthrow the government. Sure. So they run around, they place down tokens, they infiltrate, and then they explode to a certain degree and take out those larger things. They can destroy buildings, they can destroy things that are happening already on the map. You have the Airy, which is kind of like the establishment. So this is like the old guard, and they are very ordered, and things need to happen in a certain way. And they're the hardest faction to play out of that base box because you have to be able to play the cards in a certain order, and you have to have them. Like every card you play goes into a tableau that activates every turn. So the more cards you have in the tableau, they all need to be able to activate. And occasionally you can't take an action, and then you go into decline. So bad things happen. And then you have the Vagabond who just kind of wanders around the woods and does their own thing and occasionally stabs somebody because it's funny. It's just that alone, like it just captured my attention. I'm like, I love this. This is great. The core mechanics are the same for everybody. So it's not like Vast, which was too asymmetrical.
Sure.
Like combat's the same, movement's the same, but every faction has their own way to accomplish the goals of the game. Right. And at the end, it's a race to 30 points. You're trying to get up to the top first. And everybody has their own pace that they move at. Like the cats are constantly gaining a little bit of points. The Airy is going to gain points in big chunks depending on how they're able to run their tableau. The Woodland Alliance is going to gain points in big chunks, usually towards the middle or latter half of the game as they build up pockets throughout the map. And the Vagabond kind of just kind of chugs along. And if the game goes long enough, they're just going to win because no one's messing with them.
Sure.
But that's not even it. There are 6 other factions that have been released in expansions and 2 more now coming on Kickstarter, and they're all good. You've got crows that bomb things. You've got moles that dig tunnels under people's buildings. It's a fantastic game. It's from Cole Worley, so of course, it's just a brilliant game designer at his peak. But it does all these things in a creative, interesting way, and it builds into this universe to the point now, and I'm trying to find it. Where did I put it? There's an RPG of this, a tabletop RPG of the Root universe, which I have here somewhere, but I can't see it, that has built out lore, and it works because you have all these interesting factions that have their own motivations, and they're cute and clever, but also the way they interact builds that lore. There's also an app for this, which is very good, and allows you to play it alone or online with other people. There's a Clockwork expansion that lets you play solo. It's not great, but it's fine if you really want to play alone on the table. And there again, more content on the way. Plus, again, all these plushies which are buried somewhere. With the new Kickstarter, I'm gonna get the 4th one. The Aries coming. So it's such a fantastic game. It is hard to teach. I know that's always like a criteria for me. Like, how hard is this game to teach? Because that's going to determine how often I get to play it.
Yeah.
So it is tough, but it's not as tough as like a full blown coin game. Or even like a more asymmetrical game from Leader like Vast. It's more accessible in a lot of ways because it is also thematic. Like Cole Worley builds such a tight, interesting, easy to follow formula that once you get through that kind of threshold of like, wait, everybody's different. That's hard. It's not actually that hard. So Root, and such a good game. Number 4.
It's a very good game, and thanks to the cuddly creatures, kids can now learn how to do counterinsurgency.
Right? Yes. My daughter won a contest for an art contest when she was like 4 or 5 on their last Kickstarter. And she's like, so what's the game about? And I'm like, well, imagine the government doing things you really don't like and putting people down, and then you fight back, but in the woods. Huh? She's like, what?
So like now, like what's happening now.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this was again a few years ago. I didn't have to imagine at the point, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Root, it's fantastic. Play it.
There you go. All right. I think you made the point. I think we get it. Play the game and learn to support the revolution. That's all I'm saying. The mice know what they're doing. The mice know what they're doing, people. Play the mice.
Down with the cats. Up with the mice. Woo, woo, woo.
My number 4 game is, I mean, it's weird to say, like, one of the greatest games of all time. It's number 4, but it could certainly be number 1 because it does something that we've talked about for quite some time. And in fact, Anthony, I jumped back to like an old episode that we were talking about. I think it was 170 something, and we were talking about Star Wars games. And what if there was a Star Wars game that actually did Star Wars right and had all the Star Wars things? And I think if you go back to even an older episode, me and Drew were kind of speculating. We used to do this every year. This is one of the features we used to have, like what will be the next year of games. And I predicted, I'm like, we're going to get a Death Star because we never had a Death Star in any like modern tabletop designer board game kind of situation. And it's the Death Star is heavy. We got Star Wars Rebellion.
We did.
It's Star Wars in a box, kids. You know Star Wars. It's got all the Star Wars things. It's got the Star Wars. You got the Star Wars troopers. You know the troopers, right? The AT-ATs. And you got the Imperial Walkers. And you got the Star Destroyers. And you got the Death Star. Death Star comes in the game, kids. All the Imperial fascism that has a nice abstract theme along with it. And the Rebel Alliance that's trying to take down the government. Do we have a take down the government theme? I think we have a take down the government thing.
We might have to take down the government theme this week.
We're going to get flagged from that from YouTube just by saying that. But it's a board game, and it's by Disney. Look, it's got the Disney logo, so it's okay, kids. It's okay to take down the fascists. I'm just saying, it's in a board game format, and you get the Force because that's good. One of the great things about Rebellion, if you have not played Rebellion, it allows you to play the original trilogy your way. Whether you play the Empire or you play the Rebels in the game, you're going to be able to build up your characters, your fleets, and do the things that you need to do in order to, if you're the Empire, chase down the Rebels, or if you're the Rebels, sabotage the Empire long enough for the revolution to really take place. So it's a cat and mouse game. We just talked about that, Anthony, cat and mouse game. So hidden movement is key. So this kind of, shoulders up to War of the Ring, the board game, second edition, of course, because it's a very tense back and forth game where you're trying to hide out as the Rebels, and as the Empire, you're desperate to seek them down. And you can utilize different characters in this game. You can be the Emperor and bring some of the good characters over the Force. You can capture characters. You can blow up characters. You can bring in land forces down to the planet. You could have big space battles. Fun, man. Like, you got your cutes, man. But look, Darth Vader, man. Darth Vader comes in this game.
You can't beat Darth Vader in the game.
I know. Watch this. See? See, that worked. Darth Vader.
Yeah, that's good.
The mouse was not phased. That's because the mice.
That's a mouse, man. Yeah,
I know.
Cat's over here. Look at this cat. Look how dead eyes those cats are. It's no good. The mouse. Mouse knows what's up. So I had this at number 15. I totally agree with everything you said, and it's just not quite as high as the other ones, but it is definitely one of my favorites. 2-player long asymmetrical epic games are the way to go, man. Rebellion.
Absolutely.
Rebellion's awesome.
That's Star Wars Rebellion.
All right. Next up for me, and we are getting into it here. Last 3. My number 3 game of all time is I almost felt like this was cheating at first because we had to retire a bunch of games, right? We did our Hall of Fame. And so we retired, 5 games each, which means we retired from both sides. And I was like, okay, cool. And I ran through my thing and I put it together and I was like, oh, okay, this is my top 10. Is this okay? Am I cheating? It doesn't really feel like the same game, but here we go. War of the Ring, the card game.
What?
Yeah. So this one came out a couple years ago, and we were super excited about it.
Sure.
It didn't sneak up on us. We heard about it in January. It came out in December, so we had a lot of time to build hype over this game, and I still was never quite sure if it was going to work, right? Because War of the Ring is a big, long, epic game. There's a lot going on, and so much of it depends on the board and the figures on the board and kind of the math and how that works. How do you boil all that down to cards? But they got the right person to do it. They got Ian Brody, who's Quartermaster General, is just a fantastic card game that manages to do a whole-blown war game in just cards. So like, okay, knows what he's doing on that front. And they use the same artwork, so you'd have the same aesthetics of everything. And it doesn't feel like War of the Ring, the board game, and yet it somehow also does.
Sure.
Right? It evokes the feeling of going through that journey without necessarily evoking the feeling of going through that game. So it gives me the same like thematic feels, right, when I'm playing the game. But it's more streamlined. It's a card game. War of the Ring, the card game or the board game, you have to play with 2 players. Like it says 2 to 4, but it's a 2-player game. 4 players and that is not fun at all. And then you have this one, which says 2 to 4 players, and it's really a 4-player game. And I wouldn't say 2 players is not very fun at all. So it actually works out great as a companion piece, because if you have 2 players, you play the board game. If you have 4 players, you play the card game. And now you have the expansion. You can play 6 players in the card game. But no, it's fantastic. You just the way everything builds over the course of the game, and the multiple different ways that you can kind of construct it, whether you want to play the whole trilogy or just like run through the fellowship part. It's such a smart, clever way to spin this out, to the point like we played in the tournament at Gen Con last year, and it felt like a great tournament game, like the way it kind of flows. So it's War of the Ring, the card game, number 3. I thought I still feel a little bit like I'm cheating, but I'm okay with that because it's so good.
Well, that game is higher on my list.
Is it higher, or is it
my number 3 game? Is
the same on your list? That's not higher. That's the same.
Well, it came after, so therefore it's higher.
That's whoa! Wait a second.
Look, I know Ian Brody. He's a friend of mine. He would vouch for that. I'm just saying.
I know Ian Brody. He's also a friend of mine. Okay, let's call him up.
All right, let's do that. Ian, you there? He's probably in the chat right now.
Okay, Ian, let's know.
Everything you said about War of the Ring, the card game, also very true. The one extra thing that I will point out in this game, beyond the fantastic artwork that you can just love the entire time, and again, I should also mention, Ares actually makes this game affordable. So thank you, Ares, for making a game that actually we can play. But one of the really things that sticks out, and you mentioned this at the end, Anthony, about the number of players that can play this game. So you can play 2, you can play 4, you can play at 6. But the opportunity to play in a team of 2 or 3 is still kind of unique and different. And it gives me some of those tissue vibes where you do have a serious partner and you don't know what cards they have in hand or what they're able to play. And it's up to you to figure out what cards to play when in order to best allow your situation to develop. So if you're on the fellowship side of it, you want to be able to hide the hobbits and get them through. You want to be able to protect your lands and such. And if you're on the dark side of the whole, trilogy here that they play in the game, you really want to be able to crush the competition, get the Nazgul out there. And that kind of interaction between the team player is really what elevates this game.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why this game is, again, this would still be a very high game for me. But one of the reasons why I would recommend this to people who, even if they don't like Lord of the Rings or not like a general fan, the opportunity to really play with a partner in designer tabletop game with such a smart kind of card game. And again, like the other games we've talked about previously, when you play this game and you have those cards in your hand, you always feel like you're going to be victorious. You always feel powerful. You always feel dynamic. And then each and every time someone comes out and throws out some other cards, that you're like, oh, no, the hand of cards, like the hand of cards. It's a fantastic game. It's my number 3 too.
Oh, we both did it.
Card game. We did a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a funny thing because you have like War of the Ring, Star Wars Rebellion, Dune War for Arrakis. They all technically play with 4 players, and it's even technically the same formula where you're both playing 2 halves of that like 2 different factions within that space.
Sure.
But at the board game, it's not fun because you're just sitting there and you're like, all right, well, I don't need to do anything over there, so I guess you do stuff, and I'll do stuff over here. Like it doesn't gel the way this game does because this game is designed to do that.
Yes.
Like each deck is its own synergies, and then the decks themselves synergize with each other, not individual cards.
Yes.
And the way you build out your own tableau, and then you don't necessarily put those cards out right away. You kind of put them in reserve and decide when you want to push them out. It's just it's like a tactical chess match in which you are like telepathically working with another player. I don't know that I've ever played anything quite like that. I think you said Tichu. That's really the only other game I can think of that's like that. And that's so specific as like a ladder climbing game. This is so much more thematic.
Very true.
All right. Number 2. I almost said when I mentioned Voyages of Marco Polo that it was my favorite worker placement game. And I was like, oh wait, number 2. Sorry. I have to back up a little bit.
No.
I forgot my number 2 is Ultimate Railroads, which is the epitome of a worker placement game. It's just straight up worker placement. There's nothing that is not worker placement in this game. Now, the reason I say Ultimate Railroads and not just Russian Railroads is because you can't buy Russian Railroads anymore. And I wouldn't put Russian Railroads alone up here this far. I would need to have German Railroads mixed in, right? So Ultimate Railroads gives you Russian, German, American, and Asian Railroads. And American is whatever. The Asian Railroads has a really cool sideboard that lets you put up crazy high scores in the 500s. My high score now is like 610 with this game, but it's really stupidly high. But really, it's German Railroads that you want, and you can't buy that by itself anymore. It was a standalone expansion for a long time, like with not even for a long time, for a little while with Z-Man. Now it costs hundreds of dollars if you want it, and so now you have to buy the big, stupid, heavy box with all the stuff in it. And that's fine because you do get everything and it is awesome. So what is the game? The game is a worker placement game in which you are building out your own personal railroads. It is a snowballing points game, which I find super fun. I know some people don't like that. They like it to be tight and small and direct and everything fits together. But everything you build each round, up to 6 or 7 rounds, depending on the player count, carries over to the next round. So if you score 10 points in round 1, you will also score 10 points in round 2, plus whatever additional you build on, all the way up to round 6 or 7, in which you're scoring 150 points on top of whatever you've already scored. So everything you do kind of snowballs into the next thing. So you're expanding these tracks and these rails. You're building out towards upgrades. You're trying to get these special tokens. You're trying to get these end game scoring tokens and cards. The German railroads, why that's so important is because it adds variability to the boards in a way that makes it less quote unquote solvable. Like if you just played straight Russian railroads without any of the add-ons and modules, you might get 5 or 6 good plays out of it before you're like, it gets samey and it feels a little solvable. But with the German railroads, you have some portability to it. There's different pieces that come in and swap out to make your board unique from other players. You have the coal mechanism that comes in. You have the solo mechanism that comes in. With the Asian railroads, you have a whole sideboard that changes how the industry track works. So you can move around and activate different parts of the industry track at different times, which is really interesting and extremely powerful if you time it right. It's just every time I play this game, it makes me smile because it doesn't matter if I'm winning because I'm just like putting up such stupidly high numbers. I'm like, I have 400 points now. I have 500 points now. Look at me, I'm over 600 points now. Oh, you have 700? Okay. I saw 620. I'm happy. It's pure worker placement, and it's designed in a way just to always be building towards something. And it stops at about the point where you feel like it should, where you're like, okay, well, I'm like at the end of this track, I'm 2/3 of the way up this track. This one's not quite started, but I'm pretty far. If I had another round, I'd probably max everything out, and then that wouldn't be fun.
Sure.
Right? Because you're not min-maxing anymore. You're just kind of ending the track. So it's just like perfectly balanced in that way as well. So Ultimate Railroads, which is the ultimate version of Russian Railroads, and is my number 2.
I'm really glad that, I mean, Russian Railroads is great. It would be on our list regardless. German Railroads is extraordinary expansion for already a great game. And then for them to kind of pop up and go next level with the Asian Railroads and the Ultimate Railroads so that you can really play out that formula. I think the original, at least my original kind of critique was the only thing that just kind of hampered it for me was there was only, it always felt like there was just like, this is always the best spot to go to, and then this, and then this. And now at this point, there's so many options, and you score so many points throughout that nothing hinders your progress. So the game is not, again, not pun intended, on rails.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because I mentioned with Marco Polo and I mentioned with Lorenzo, I like a tight Euro where it's really hard to know what to do and there aren't a lot of options.
Yeah.
Ultimate Railroads is like, you know what? Maybe the stuff we want to do gets blocked, but you can always do something, and then you're going to score a ton of points no matter what. Like, you really have to mess it up to do that poorly. Like, you might lose, but you're not going to do that poorly. It's just a game that gives me joy. So,
and it comes in one box.
It is in one box now. That is good, yeah. And previously, like, the American Railroads expansion was like essentially a promo you got through the Board Game Geek store.
Sure.
It was hard to find. Not as hard to find as German Railroads, but pretty hard. So the dumb thing that they did, which I do have to mention, is the only way to get the Asian Railroads expansion is with this big box.
That is dumb.
So if you already had all the other stuff, which I did,
yes,
then you have to buy this whole big box to get that new thing. And that is stupid. Now, I passed along my copy, so I don't have to do that. Like, I'm being nice to someone else. But I wasn't thrilled with that. I don't like when companies do that. And they changed the color of the freaking tokens just to make sure that it wasn't compatible. It was freaking Asmodee.
All right. Well, my number 2 game is one of our favorite publishers, one of our favorite designers, and one of our favorite artists. This is Lisboa from 2017. Designer Vital Lacerda.
Ooh, you get to lift a big one.
Ian O'Toole. And publisher Eagle Griffin Games, who absolutely positively knows how to put out a giant, beautiful, gorgeous game at the table. Lisboa is all about Lisbon, and it's dealing with all of the destruction that the city dealt with. And now you're coming in here to rebuild the city. So you have these wonderful tableau pieces that you're going to be able to place your cards in. And again, multi-use cards, kids. So you'll be able to utilize the cards for a number of different actions on the particular player board. And then you're going to go into the city center that dealt with an earthquake, a fire, and a flood, and be able to rebuild it with the same materials that were from the damaged city, which is also absolutely true and thematic of the time. You're dealing with the church, you're dealing with the royalty, you're dealing with all the different patrons out there. And it's thick, it's crunchy, and it's so thematically fun. And a lot of the scoring cards come into this game, so there's a lot of ways to kind of build successful scores. And you're building throughout hundreds of years. So from the start to the finish, you're actually able to see the city built up. You are part of that process. And just a lot of great ways to kind of build up. And based on what everyone else does, you'll be able to gain additional actions as well. And there's a lot of different actions that come into play here. It's a beautiful, gorgeous game to get to the table. One of the greatest games I've ever played. And actually had the opportunity, you and I, to actually play this at a convention with Vital Lacerda.
I know. It was on my birthday. It was amazing.
On your birthday, of all things. Just a work of art throughout. Just artisan, artist, just publisher, just genius throughout. Lisboa.
Yeah, this was my number 83. It is, Vital Lacerda has made a lot of beautiful, wonderful, amazing games. It was really hard for me to rank them and then to put those into my other ranking.
Yeah.
I think I have 3 of them in there, and it's just like, how many can I jam in here? Because I like so many of his games. And like, since we started doing this list, you and I played Inventions. I remember we had this conversation after playing. Like, where does this go? Would this be in my top 100? This is pretty good. Like, I don't know how many I can jam in here. I already have too many Rosenberg games. I need a bunch of Lacerda games too. But yeah, Lisboa it's such a fantastic game. I wish it was easier to like pick up and replay after a long time. I think that's the barrier for me, is like, oh, I haven't played it in 18 months. I have to relearn it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but it is amazing. All right. We are there, friend. We're at the last one. We're at number 1. Can you guess what my number 1 game is?
One game of all time.
Of all time.
The top 500 episodes, the top 100 games of all time. This is the moment. This is the time. After 11 years, Anthony Chatfield, your one and only, has a new number 1.
It is. Can you guess what it is? Do you have any idea?
Probably almost no idea.
All right, sweet. I'll ask the chat. What do you think it is? I don't know who's going to get it. It's fine. So this is a game. It's actually relatively new, and I talked about it.
I know what it is.
I know. I talked about it last year for 3.5 weeks.
I thought about this, and I was like, could it be this? And it is this.
Yeah. It's Voidfall, friends. It's Voidfall. So I had to replace one game that takes 8 hours to play with another one that takes 8 hours to play. This is only the top half of the box because I've had this game set up on my table downstairs for 2 weeks, and the bottom half of the box has a bunch of plastic in it. So, also the box weighs like 15 pounds. I'm not going to drag it up the stairs. But Voidfall, so Mind Clash makes amazing games. We can't argue that, right? We both have Mind Clash games in our top 100, but they hit with me in different ways, right? Like I love Anachrony, but I get overwhelmed with some pieces of it sometimes. I loved Tricarion, but I can't get it to the table. It's too much. I really didn't like Cerebria very much. And so I backed Voidfall because I was like, it's got Ian O'Toole art. I love the way he does space.
Yes.
I like Turchi's work. The original game this is based on, Omega Centauri, is good. It's not great. It's good. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. I backed it. It's a lot of money, but I'm glad I did because not only is it impossible to find now, but it turned out to be just a brilliant, brilliant game. Now, is it impenetrable? Kinda. I pulled it back out maybe the 3rd or 4th time in the last year. And when I pull it out, it tends to sit on the table for a few weeks because it takes that long. And I was setting it up and I was like, why is this still taking an hour and a half to set up? I've played this game like 20 times now. Because it's just so much to do and you got to check all these things and this goes here. Oh, wait, hold on. Does that go there? No, that goes here because this happened. It's a lot. It takes up the whole table. There's like 6 sideboards. There's all these different things to keep track of. There's different decks of cards. Mm-hmm. But the thing about the game that really astounds me every time I play it, because I always do like a little refresh on the rules, is that it all makes sense once you start doing it, right? And it doesn't seem like it should. It has a menu that's a 4 full 8.5 by 11 pages of icons. Like the iconography in this game will burn your brain out the first time you play it, and you will just check that glossary over and over again. It's like, what does this symbol mean? What does this symbol mean? What does this symbol mean? But they've effectively written their own language here, and it does make sense. It's consistent. It's visually, it works. Like, I think this is one of those situations where whatever they paid Ian O'Toole was not enough because he has done an amazing job here of making this game accessible from a design perspective. I think if you had the wrong designer in this game, it wouldn't work. Because it could be too busy. It could be unclear. It could be inconsistent across the iconography. It's none of those things. It's all very clear and it makes sense. And once those things start to make sense in your head, like this level of arrow means this, and this level of arrow means this, and this little burst means this, and this, flat line means this, then those things start to combine and it literally is its own language.
Yeah.
So Voidfall, it's not a 4X game at all. It's a Euro through and through with a 4X theme. And it is one of the more complex games you'll ever play because it has so many systems on systems to it. But underneath all of that is this like underspoken elegance where everything you do flows into everything else you do, right? It gives me the same vibe as like Mage Knight where you sit down to take a turn and so there's 3 cycles in the game and each cycle will have between 3 and 5 rounds. And so when you go to take, an action in a round, that one action might turn into 7 or 8 things you do. Yeah. And you want to make sure that the order in which you do those things is the most efficient possible. So you sit and you look and you like, okay, if I do this and do this, that card, that agenda means I want to move up these tracks. Got it. If I want to move up these tracks, I need to be able to take this type of action. Got it. If I take this type of action, though, I can't do this thing over here. And then that alarm, that card up there is going to hit me. And then the Voidborn are going to hit me. So I need to make sure I manage that. But if I do that, it's okay because I'll score points from this. Like, it's working through all those pieces and building it up together in your head and then finding the best solution to it, which I'm totally aware some people would look at that and be like, gosh, no, I don't want anything to do with that. This is overwhelming. I don't want to take 20 minutes to take a turn in a game. But for me, that's peak gaming. That's fun for me. Like, I really enjoy being able to do that. It is the pinnacle of a puzzle as a board game. I've not played almost any other game. Again, Mage Knight is probably the closest I can think of. That just feels as much like a big giant puzzle with a bunch of pieces that all fit together in the right way at the end, and how to figure out how to put them together. Now, the one thing the game has against it is that it's playing it with other people is a little tough, right? It takes an hour and a half to set up. That's a barrier. That you choose between competitive and co-op. The rules are slightly different, so you have to basically refresh on that. Teaching the game takes a while. Like, if I wanted to sit down and play this with somebody, like, I almost set it up when you came down the other day, and I'm like, this is the only thing we're going to play all day if we do this.
Yeah.
Like, we're just going to play the tutorial, and it's going to take 7 hours. Like, that's a lot. Like, and so, like, you have to have people who want to do that. Once you get through that barrier and everybody knows how to play, it's a little bit shorter, because overall in a game, you might take, at the most 15 total round actions. It's not like a ton of actions, but each time you do, it takes a long time. So yeah, Voidfall, big, messy, potentially at times broken, brilliant game. It's always stuck in my head, and I knew it was number one because each time I take it out, it sits on the table for days. I'm like, okay, I'm going to reset it. I'm going to play it again. I'm going to reset it. I'm going to play it again. I need to work at this table. I guess I'll shove this stuff to the side a little bit. Hey, the cat knocked a bunch of stuff over. I'll fix it, reset it, play it again. Because I don't want to put it away, because I know it'll take a long time to set it back up.
Sure.
So, there you go, folks. My new number one, Voidfall.
Congratulations, buddy.
I did it.
You did
It's a different game.
That is a different game. That is a radical departure. That is super crunchy. Mind Clash knows how to build all these big games, and they take big swings. We've talked about them quite some time.
Yeah, no, this is peak Mind Clash, right?
Yeah.
And the cool thing too, this is unrelated to the game, but like, they've built a world here. Like, there's a lot of lore in the rule books, and you're reading through it. I'm like, this is kind of cool. It gives me like Twilight Imperium vibes, just in terms of like background and lore.
Sure.
To the point where they have another game coming out next year. They're launching another Kickstarter for a completely unrelated system that takes place in this world.
Yes.
And they got a tool to make sure the art's consistent. I'm like, that's cool. I'll probably back that. I don't know what it is, but I like this Voidborn universe. It's a cool space.
Sure.
And it's, you've got all these different factions going up against this kind of unspoken foe. I don't know. It's peak space, but again, without the 4X, which I think I appreciate the most, because most space games are 4X, which I love a good 4X game, but I also like other things. So it's cool to have it.
Yeah, I think the only challenge with the game is the rule book, that they kind of squeezed everything in there.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, once you've learned the rules, it actually makes it pretty easy to find what you need. But the first time you learn the game, it is a little rough. I will say, though, in the year since it came out, there are a lot of decent videos now on YouTube. Whereas like a year ago when I was learning it, there were not. It was a huge, huge lift to learn this game when I first got it in. It's a lot less now, like, to refresh on it.
Sure.
So there's some people out there who've done good work.
Excellent. All right, Anthony, it is that time. I have a number one game that is also new. I gotta these giant lists of games.
I know you got like a lot of weightlifting in today.
I know. A lot of core work done today. Anthony, this is my number one game of all time. This has been our number one game from last year. This is Hegemony. Lead your class to victory. This came out in 2023. It was a Kickstarter game. It simulates contemporary asymmetrical political economic systems utilizing Euro games. and you're like, all right, I'm ready to go to sleep because like that sounds tired. And guess what? Wake up, because there is a lot of fun here. There's a lot of colorful factions in play. Basically, you are playing one of 4 different political economic classes in the game. They're all asymmetric, not a single asymmetric power, but in fact, all of the different classes in play are asymmetric. So they all have different things, their own little game that they have to do in order to obtain a victory that's also unique to them. But here's the twist: you need and you will work with the other factions at the table. So you have the working class, the middle class, the capitalist class, and the state. So you're talking about the different classes in an economic democracy kind of system. They're based on social democracy, neoliberalism, nationalism, and globalism. So if you want to kind of dig down into that kind of economic, social, political kind of understanding, you can do that. You don't need to do that because the game is so much fun. Because again, when you want to play one of these kind of big games at the table, you always want to play a game with like that builds this kind of big epic story at the table. Typically, those games are those 4X games, your Twilight Imperiums, your Eclipse, and what if there was another game where you're building but interacting with people on a ground level each and every turn? So what the government does affect all of the different classes at the table. What the capitalist does affects the workers, affects the state. Again, all of these different things are in play. They're all jockeying for position throughout to kind of influence the different laws that come up so that the gameplay shifts at a global level at the table. And again, your own faction, your own people, your own stakes in the game are yours unique. So you have to know all the different factions in play and what they're after, and you can benefit from them. You can challenge them. You can try to take them down, but you have to remember the economic system is all one big fishbowl. So what happens to one kind of happens to the rest at the table. This is a long, crunchy game at the table, but at the end, you'll have a big experience that is realistic to the world, thematic in gameplay, and each of the factions has their own little bit separate gameplay. But as you play one, you learn the others throughout. So one of the biggest, crunchiest economic games, thematic games at the table, Hegemony. Lead your class to victory. And that's my number 1 game of all time for 2024, at least.
Yeah, for now. Until we retire it, until you force you to retire it.
Yes. This is the economic state is really heavy.
I know. Yeah, I thought I'd be the one with all the heavy boxes this week. No, mine are pretty normal sized.
Yeah, I know.
So I had one big one, but I cheated and only brought the lid.
Oh, that would have been the one that would crush you. That Void Floor one is
yeah.
Game.
I know. I was like looking at it this morning. I'm like, should I box this up so I can bring it upstairs? I'm like, no, just bring the lid. What are you doing? Don't do that.
You could have let me know that earlier. I would have like saved a hip or something.
But I wasn't cheating so much as I just didn't want to put my game away. Hegemony's awesome though. Like it was our game of the year last year, and for many, many reasons. Again, coming back to that theme of taking on the government, right?
Yes. Well, also you get to be the government, and you could be the capitalist class, you could be the workers. It just allows you to play all the different roles that are in play in our economic system. So instead of watching all the corporate news out there, play the game that actually shows you the movers and shakers, how they interact with the media, how they interact with the public. And again, fun. You actually get to have fun learning and interacting, and you can see how all the different factions come into play and are also challenging of each other at the same time.
Yeah, it's such a brilliantly made game. I wish I had played it more, honestly. Like I've played it obviously, and we discussed it last year, but it's a game it's difficult at the table. I think you and I have scheduled it several times and just hasn't worked out.
Yeah.
I want to play this game more because I'm looking at it, I'm like, I feel like this would be up there for me, higher on my list, and it hasn't hit the table enough.
You can play it solo, but really the way to play it is a 4-player game because the interaction with the other players at the table is ideal. So yes, you could play at 2, you could play at 3. The government takes a backseat role, but you want and you need to play this at 4. So if you're not like really into it at the solo or at a lesser state of play, please play at least once at 4 players. You will not be disappointed. The Kickstarter came with a lot of cool stuff, and again, just like Voidfall, Hegemony is also getting a spiritual successor. I think it's World Domination's coming out on some crowdfunding source. I think probably next year at this point, but it's out there for play on some areas. So just a phenomenal time to get a game to the table and just crunch into it. And it's not about lasers and monsters and stuff like that, but also incredibly fun.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Great number 1.
All right, well, there you go, everybody. That is our top 100 games of all time. Episode 500 is finally done. 500 episodes of Board Gamers Anonymous, over 11 plus years at the table, which each and every one of you out there, again, we can't express our gratitude enough. We love and thank you all for being here. Those who've joined us tonight on YouTube for our live feed, we really hope that you've enjoyed this live presentation. We'll see about doing more in the future. Obviously, if you're on patreon.com/BGA, you're getting a lot of additional content there. We want to hear from all of you. So join us on Patreon, but you can also join us on Facebook for our question of the week. Let us know, hit us up. And again, boardgamersanonymous.com is kind of the hub for everything that BGA does. And we do a lot of stuff out there. So keep up with us on that website. That website's always going to be key to finding out what we're up to next. All right, so until next time, this is Chris.
And this is Anthony.
And we'll save you all a seat at the table. Take care, everyone.
Bye. All right.